Welcome to the Cycle Starters podcast, where we explore the powerful journeys of those who are breaking generational patterns and weaving new threads of healing through their ancestral lines. I'm your host, Heather Rebecca Wilson, and today I am so thrilled to introduce you to one of my best friends in the entire world, Ali Jost. Ali brings more than 13 years of experience as a therapist, trainer, and coach to her work. She's skilled in delivering sensory motor psychotherapy and other body based talk therapies across a wide variety of settings, both clinical and beyond. As a dynamic trainer and seasoned coach, Ali has facilitated multi-year organizational change processes, trauma-informed care learning communities, and staff retreats designed to heal and empower leaders and their teams. Ali is one of the founders of Rooting Resilience, a Washington, D.C. based collective that provides technical assistance to human service organizations in areas like trauma-informed care, integrated behavioral health, workforce resilience, and change management. Before launching her independent practice and co-founding Rooting Resilience, Ali led strategic communications for community-based and national advocacy organizations working toward immigrant rights, racial equality, and economic justice. In today's conversation, we'll dive deep into Ali's ancestral healing journey, explore the patterns she's breaking, the cycles she's starting, and the unique medicine she's sharing with the world through her practice and offerings. So, before we start this juicy conversation, I do have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying the content that we're creating here on the Cycle Starters podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really supports the algorithm in getting our episodes in front of more viewers. So thank you in advance for that. I really appreciate the support. And without further ado, let's start our conversation with Ali. Hello, beautiful.
Hello, beautiful Heather.
How are you? I know you're
I'm
recovering from surgery.
I am recovering from an old age surgery as they know, but I'm doing very well. I'm healing well and very grateful for that. And very grateful to be with you, old friend.
I know. This is such a treat. So, yes, I said in the intro when I was sharing all of the embodied wisdom and experience that you're bringing to this conversation, we've also been friends for many years. So, this is really very, very special. So, thank you for being on the show with me today.
I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see you. And we've also worked together, which has been a beautiful thing. Um, helping teams become more trauma informed. We've definitely been on adventures in that world with change management for organizations. You have lots of experience with that. I want to start with your blood ancestry. So, what can you tell us about your blood ancestors?
So my mom was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and has a lot of family that were sort of, early kind of American colonizers. So some people came through even Jamestown. It goes all the way back there. They were British and maybe tiny little bit of French at some point, mainly British, a little bit of Irish. And I don't, know a ton of the details, but they were, American colonists immigrating when it first was a thing in the European colonist days. And that's a complex part of my ancestry that I definitely think of in our conversation and some of the work I do to break cycles and think about that. My mom was a cycle breaker, so she left. This very traditional Southern large family is quite sexist, I will add. But she met my dad, and his ancestry is actually Swiss on both sides. So both of his parents, though they emigrated, one never emigrated to the US, was Canadian, but my grandmother on that side had emigrated her father after Ellis Island. He was a silk trader, silk worker, and he came to produce silk textiles in the Bronx and in Brooklyn back in the time when all of a sudden there was a market to buy beautiful fabrics in the US. So that side of the family, I know a little bit less about, honestly, other than that, really, those sort of more recent immigrants. But I like to think that they were probably like dairy type farmers in this one part of Switzerland where they were from. I don't really know much. Um, but that's the side of the family that I look the most like. And when I do the 23andMe, that's where a lot of my bloodline comes from. But I certainly have the southern nervous system and that sort of high intensity crowd down there from the south. So that's a little bit of it.
Thank you for sharing that. I did not
Mhm.
know about this textile background on your paternal side. That's really interesting. All right. So, my next question is, I mean, you just said a lot there, and we're going to dive into this a lot more. But when did this concept of ancestral healing enter your consciousness, insofar as when did you realize, okay, things can be passed down through the generations, but then also when did you get in your power around, "Oh, I have the power to actually shift these cycles. I can change them and plant new seeds." So, tell me a little bit about your journey around this.
Yeah, I think the language I probably first came to around it was more around, family history, understanding culture, and some of the traumas and relationship traumas that were coming through the family line. And I think one of the benefits of having a parent that left the family system um, is that there's this sort of constant reflection on it, as opposed to being totally enmeshed and immersed in it. I grew up in a family where my mom was definitely struggling with what she had taken, the way she had been treated as a child, and still has loving relationships with all family members. I just it's complicated, right? Families are very complicated. And so, but from a very young age, I was aware, oh, these relationships are complicated and important, and my mom doesn't always want to be there. And my mom left, and yet she sort of feels like she wants to be there, but then she kind of struggles every time we go. So I think that was probably, at age 8 or something, I started to really learn this concept of, oh my gosh, we are about where we're from. And it is also a Southern culture to be very focused on, the family. And in some similar ways that I see in many cultures and many immigrant communities, there is this sort of ownership over the family, which is not as typical in, say, where you and I grew up in the Mid Atlantic, where it's sort of like everyone's a transplant. There's like a little bit more like we're just starting over, but there is a little bit more of that. So I had that curiosity, that sort of knowing that there was this family line that I could react to, and in my dad's family, of course, was so different, so different, kind of almost European in their way of being, happened to be very kind, but were also quite closed off and just not as messy in the ways that my Southern family were, not as emotionally, at least on the surface. So I think that's the beginning of it. And in terms of me then becoming a more seasoned and reflective person about like who am I in this system, I think that journey probably started in high school. I had my older sister, who's 3 years older, was early on wanting to kind of walk her own path. And so I got to sort of see that. And when you have an older sister doing that, it's such a beautiful model. So I kind of knew, oh, I don't have to live like my parents live, or I don't have to do it the same way. So that invitation was always safe. And then, as you, of course, know a little bit more about me, then I ended up diving into studying human beings, like just loving human beings. And I was an anthropology major in college and just fell in love with who are humans and how complex are humans and how do we become who we are and how do we have so many similarities across cultures, but so many differences. And I think that just diving into curiosity of what makes us who we are in all of the complexities of identities and all the complexities of lived experiences, then just traveled with me on to eventually social work school, where work in many ways in diverse settings of people of all sorts of different nationalities and racial identities and spiritual identities and geographic identities and gender identities. So just a lot of access to people, but then studying me in it. What kind of internalized biases and dominances do I have in me because of my life and upbringing? And how does that show up in good ways and in not good ways and in all the things in between? So I think it just kind of was going to happen. No matter what I did, I was going to become who I am.
Did you know early on that you wanted to be a therapist? I mean, you worked in the nonprofit space for a long time, right? So what was that decision to really go into this? What did that entail?
I didn't know I wanted to be a therapist right away. I knew that I wanted to make I mean, I know this sounds kind of silly right now, especially in the times we're in and just the wise age that we're becoming, but I knew I wanted to make the world a more just place. So I think baked into me was knowing that it isn't just. I had come with lots of privilege, lots of economic privilege, certainly racial privilege in a white supremacist world. Um, access to excellent education at an early age. So I knew that that was special and privileged. And I wanted to work in spaces where we were systemically rebalancing that. And I really believed that we really could in doing things like immigration reform in the United States, or at some point I was interested in maybe doing some more global industrialization and globalization reform to sort of equalize what was happening in the world. It was all just ideas. You study it in college and you just think this is the way it's going to work and you believe in it and um, believe in the possibility. And I still do believe in the possibility, but at some point in the work in labor unions and particularly in the immigrant rights movement, I kind of realized the system of the U.S. democracy and U.S. politics is so broken that I'm not going to see this change this way in my lifetime. And it sort of was that crushing realization 10 years into that type of work. And it was that crushing realization because I had a naive sense that like in my lifetime, this is going to change or, that I started doing much more internal work and becoming more aware as well of what makes me tick and what are sort of my strengths and sort of understanding that I have an inclination towards more one-on-one work with people or small teams work or deeper work, I should say, not as much just the communication strategy work or the campaign work, which I actually love, but it wasn't filling my soul. And that happened when I was like 30, and that's when that shift started happening, and I started pursuing um, the clinical skills that I use today.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm reminded that one of our now friends, but former teachers called you his therapist back in I don't know, was it 7th grade, 8th grade, or ninth grade or something? It's
Oh
like,
my
"Allie's
gosh,
my
I forgot
therapist."
that. I
Yeah,
forgot that.
yeah, Mr.
Crazy.
Morgan, and every time I tell him that I'm seeing you, he's like, "Oh, tell my therapist I said hi." I know. It's really
Yeah.
sweet, but I think your very caring and introspective nature and your ability to hold space, I think that was just very evident from a young age. So here we are, and you're doing amazing things in the world. So, I want to dive deeper into these ancestral patterns that you're breaking. And you mentioned your mom coming from this Southern culture. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Can you unpack that? What are the cycles you feel like you are ending, right, and shifting?
I mean, I think honestly, there's really two that I think are worth mentioning, and they're related. Ultimately, this is about the corruption of power and how we find the right balance of power in ourselves, light in ourselves, not power over people, power over things, or on the other side, sort of being a martyr where you're powerless. Ultimately, I think that's the biggest cycle that I am always thinking about breaking. And to be clear, there's so many complex layers to that. That's a lifelong journey, moment by moment journey, right? And for anyone who's in a long-term partnership, wow, is that a great place to play that one out? And so I'm very lucky to have an awesome long-term marriage and partner, that sort of gets played out too. But I think that one, and then the other one, which is super related, is sexism. So on my mom's side, if I look down the lines, right, there's large families, 4 kids or more, kind of a dynamic. Not always elites. They weren't always wealthy. There's sort of a complex balance between that. But the one very clear through line, there's a lot of elites, there's a lot of wealth, but there's a lot of male energy. There's a lot of matriarchs. They're clearly powerful in the home. They're running the shop. They're very important, but they do not tend to have a ton of power financially and independent power. There are some exceptions. My great grandmother, so my grandmother on my mom's side's mother, lost her husband when she was, 30 years old and had 2 kids to raise, and she started her own inn and raised a family. So there's some exceptions. I think on that same side of the line there was women doing a lot of work in the sort of family farm and things like that. In the immediate system that my mom was raised in and that I saw, it was a lot of sexism. And so that was really important to break. And I will say my generation and sort of my cousins in that line have mostly broken that. There's just a lot of strong women choosing what they want to do, doing what they want to do, and being in partnership with men that value women who do that, right? So on both sides. So I think that is a major cycle breaker. And then this issue of when you have access to power, whether that be wealth or the privilege of whiteness in America, how do you use that well? What do you do with that? How do you manage that? What are you in this lifetime going to focus on to sort of complicate, first of all, the problematic ways in which we have systemic inequalities based on class and race? And then how do you do that day to day? How do you really do that in your relationships? How do you do that in the jobs you pursue, in the ways in which you think about where you take, where you give, where you invest your time and your energy and yourself and that kind of stuff? So I think that the choices I have made in terms of how I earn my money, where I live, who I live with, what kinds of relationships I deepen, what spaces I choose to inhabit or not, those are all the kinds of things that really break, I think, from what might have been the instructions given to me if I were to copy what my mother or the generation before me had done. You can give examples of that, but I think that's a beginning. And you tell me what else you want to know.
I mean, you said a lot there, and thank you for sharing all of that. And the other piece we haven't discussed is that you're a mother. You are a mother to an incredible being, a young elder. What's that been like in terms of breaking family cycles? How does that show up in your parenting?
Yeah. Well, it's such a great question, Heather, because first of all, the choice to have one child. And in my lucky, very privileged life, I did choose that. That was my choice. And I'm very lucky that I had that choice. And that was a complicated choice, as all choices around motherhood or not motherhood or, they're all hard. But that was a cycle breaking choice. Yeah, I chose to marry someone who absolutely breaks all the cycles. In other words, I chose to marry someone who did not have anything similar to my upbringing in his being. Different class, different culture, same race, but really different kind of identities other than that. He wanted to have, maybe no children, or maybe we compromised on one child. And so that was a beginning cycle breaker. But more importantly, Mike and I have a real partnership. And I've had these relationships around me where usually, one person has all the power in this part of the relationship, all the power in managing the kids, or all the power in managing the finances, particularly in hetero relationships, very traditional gender breakdowns. Yeah. And I would say in some ways that the extremes continue even in my own cousins and that sort of world, right? But Mike and I are really equal in terms of parenting. Yeah, I do a little bit more of the school and the doctor's appointments in the sort of way that women have done a little more of the emotional labor on some of those things. But definitely, we really equalize the parenting roles, and have gotten a lot of practice in our relationship about this issue of how do we hold power collaboratively? How do we not, one person hold all of it and the other person has no power in different ways? We really are flex and try to do it. We try our very best to do it as collaborators.
Beautiful. I love it. I mean, I definitely see that when I am lucky enough to come visit. Thank you for sharing all of that. Well, I think I want to shift the conversation to some astrology now, if you're down with this. So, some of you watching may not know that I'm an ancestral healing guide, in addition to being this host of the Cycle Starters podcast. And I have a monthly membership. It's just gone through an update and evolution because I am very close to finishing my certification in quantum soul guidance, galactic astrology. So the membership is now called the Cosmic Awakening Circle. It's a sacred space for cycle breakers and cycle starters to start to explore their galactic selves, their galactic placements, and activate their highest soul mission. Not just what we're doing in this life, but we're really zooming out to see what's my soul's journey been across eons of time. So, galactic astrology is different from natal astrology insofar as we're looking at your natal planets, which are all the planets we're familiar with in the solar system, how they are in conversation with fixed stars, black holes, supercosmic points, nebulas. And it is so fascinating, really inspiring, and so expansive. I literally had this physical sensation of expansiveness when I got to look at my galactic placements. Like, oh my gosh, my soul is ancient. Your soul is ancient. So I'm going to give you a mini galactic astrology reading, but I want to first start with your big three, which really make up the vast majority of your energetic signature. And that would be your sun, moon, and rising signs. And so I'm always looking at astrology through the lens of ancestral healing. Everything is in the chart. You can see your ancestral wounds. You can see your deepest core wound, which is often ancestral, but also we see the gifts your ancestors have given you. We see what superpowers you have access to when you're able to transmute these wounds. So it's an intimate thing to look at someone's chart. So, first of all, thank you for letting me look at your chart. Um, so, with that all being said, you are a Virgo sun, a Virgo rising, and a Leo moon. So my moon is in Virgo. I think that's partially why we connect and understand each other. But the sun, I'll start there, is where you shine. This is the special sauce that you mix into everything that you do that makes you stand out from the 11 other astrological signs. And each of those signs is a spectrum of psycho-spiritual energy with a high expression and a low expression. And so Virgo is mutable earth in terms of its element and modality. Earth is what we use to build the structures that give us security and stability in our lives. And when it's mutable, it's changeable, it's adaptable, it can be flexible. It's not always flexible, but it has the capacity to be very flexible. And I associate this spectrum of energy with the archetype of the discerning herbalist, but also the virgin, but not the virgin that abstains from sex. It is the woman who is complete unto herself without a man. So she's not seeking wisdom outside of herself. She's going within for wisdom. I definitely feel like you are embodying this. So the high expression of Virgo is refinement, right? You have this drive to make things better, which I feel is healing, right? You're very much a healer. You're precise, you're organized, you're meticulous. And then this can go the other way, right? This can really work against you in the low expression, which can look like anxiety, being just horribly self-critical, critical of yourself, but also critical of other people, and focusing so much on the details that you miss the beauty of the bigger picture. So I want to hear from you. Tell me about this Virgo sun. What has this been like for you in your life with this signature?
Well, it's really nice hearing you summarize some of my life challenges and opportunities. Yeah, I mean, I'm 47, and so I do think one of the gifts of being this age, one of the many gifts of aging, and is that it is easier to access the higher expression of some of these qualities, right? So there's not a day though that doesn't go by that I'm not accessing the like criticism, the too obsessed with the details and getting it right, and the irritation when, um, my husband just does not orient his life that way, so doesn't know the exact time of the soccer game, right? It's like there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I'm not touching the underbelly of my Virgo gifts. It's something I have to check. What I do notice, and just in case it's helpful for others, is I notice when I've gone too hard using the gift is actually when I hit the underbelly of it. So it's when I pushed too hard on details. It's when I actually did try to help too many people. So like when I lose my own balance or boundaries, that's when I'll sort of then hit the yucky underbelly. And if I don't catch it soon enough, then it will move into that really yucky self attack and burnout. So, I think that's just one of those things that at this age, I'm just like super aware of. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but that awareness does so much to help me like just getting back in line. And then, um, because I know this is true for you too, we then use this Virgo gift to then organize our life in such a way
Yes.
that I have a lot of things out there externally to catch myself now, right? It's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I walk that dog every day and I limit how many clients I have. And, I use the gift of Virgo too to make sure that I've got those down times, those quiet times to just be, which helps me stay in the higher expression.
Well, you're a double Virgo. So you're not only a Virgo sun, you're a Virgo rising. So there is a very strong Virgo presence in your chart. And the rising sign is based on the time of day that you're born. I forgot to mention that you're also a twin. Were you born first or was Lane born first?
Well, this is like this is big, right? So I was technically born first. However,
Hmm.
it was a C-section. So Lane and I
Oh,
have the same rising sign, and we are very different. So.
yes. Yes, you are very different. So your rising sign is the vehicle for your divine mission. It's your perception of reality. It's the lens that you see everything through. And it's how you come across when people first meet you. So sometimes the rising sign qualities are in the shadow for people, whether they're, negative or positive, because they're unaware of how they come across. The sun is your egoic self, it's how you see yourself, but your rising sign is how you are behaviorally. The other cool thing about Virgo is that I would say it's the most intellectual of all the earth signs. And I compare it to Gemini, which is also mutable, but it's a different element. It's mutable air. And I'm a Gemini rising, so I'm very familiar with this energy. But we overconsume information. We want to watch all the videos, read all the books, watch all the movies, read all the articles. But Virgo is like, stop it. No, like, I just want the most important information. What is it that I need to know? So they're very meticulous. They want the priority information.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of Virgo in your chart, as I said, but then you've got this Leo moon, which is a really different energy. And so the moon represents your emotions, your emotional core, which includes your emotional inheritance, ancestral wounds, but also the gifts that your ancestors have given you. Leo is fixed fire. So, fire is inspiration and passion and that creative spark and intuition. And when an element is fixed, at least in the northern hemisphere, it's stabilizing the season. It happens in the middle of the season, so it's the middle of summer. The sun
Mm.
is blazing hot, and I would think of it as this blowtorch. It's just consistent fire. One of our good friends, he has a very strong Leo presence. This is Nish. This is the work hard, play hard energy. Leo can work their ass off and then party for days, right? And it's just there's no end to it because they just have this fire in them. They have so much energy. I would associate Leo with the archetypal energy of the devoted performer, the entertainment executive, the hostess with the mostess, just somebody who's very charismatic, but also this heart centered leader. And in the low expression of the Leo moon is you keep everything to yourself because you don't want to
Yeah.
disappoint other people because they always look to you to be the person that brings everybody together, but you're broken on the inside and you don't want to tell people, right? And so there's this performance aspect to emotions. And I would say the ancestral wound with this moon in Leo is performing. Like, I'm okay. Nothing's
Yeah.
wrong. I'm solid. Don't worry about me. Everything's fine, but it's not real. It's actually you're falling apart on the other side. But then the gift is that charisma, that passion, that creativity. So
Mhm.
tell me, how do you care for yourself? How do you care for your emotional life with this
Mhm.
Leo moon?
Yeah, I mean, um, all of it really resonates in your reading. So I will just say, and I think it really is just kind of circling back to that a little bit the Southern culture, that Southern family. For those who've ever been really lucky enough to be around some of the positive sides of that, there's just a lot of external love and hosting and care, right? And so I definitely got that from particularly the women in that side of the family. And to your point, Heather, would have come with, but can't show your real vulnerability or your real emotional truth. And in my reading of it, ultimately, they just don't even know their vulnerable truth and they just don't know
Mhm.
it. There was nobody that invited them to work on it or it wasn't safe to have access to it. So I, of course, chose to be a therapist. And so anyone who chooses to sit and hold space with other people better be damn sure that they know how to sit and hold space for themselves. So that work of being a healer with others, you just got to do your own work and it will come up if you don't. So for me, before I became a therapist, I was burning out, because of this dynamic, right? I was, over hosting even in my social life or certainly overworking in my professional life. And then I would fall apart. I mean, just literally quite fall apart. And you usually just get physically ill was my bigger pattern. And so nowadays, I am so in tune because I truly have to. It's a choice in my day to day work with my energy levels. I have to be kind of constantly monitoring that. What I've found to be really healing, I think in the beginning I would have monitored it and maybe to your reading point, like kept it quiet. Like, I'm not telling you why I don't want to hang out this weekend, or I'm not um, necessarily sharing with my loved ones why I'm isolating or pulling back to heal, right? And I think more recently, I do a lot of modeling that. And I think in some ways, just because I really do I do feel like vulnerability, to the Brene Browns of the world point in her point, like I really do think modeling vulnerability is really important for women in particular. I mean, certainly it's important to men, and there's a history of men not being allowed to express their emotions. But I find that sexism impacts women in a way that I just think is so unfortunate for us. And, I'll just give an example. Like, it would be very typical for me to then model, okay, I don't want to host a big party where that's open hearted and we're just having alcohol and partying all night. But I do want to host a craft hour where we're quietly getting together and having some tea and bring your own craft. And I'm not going to provide a ton of food. I'll just be like pretty clear about it. And so what ends up happening is I say, like, there's a way for us to be together and be open-hearted and connect without me depleting myself. And there's a way
Yeah.
for you to do that too, you know?
Very powerful. You are the hostess with the mostess. You've hosted some amazing parties, many, many, many amazing parties, actually. And I've also been a witness to your journey around this because, yeah, you are prone to burnout. That's the thing, right? Because I think it gives you a lot of joy to host people. It gives you a lot of joy to be surrounded by friends and share your heart with them because you are very, very loving and generous. Um, but you can also really, like, get yourself in the hospital with this, um, with this placement if you're not careful, you know? So,
Yes.
the
Yes.
other interesting thing, I I found about the Leo growth journey is that it's often about finding the right stage for you to shine. And so I will often see people on both ends of the spectrum where, on the one hand, they are addicted to the spotlight and getting praise and validation externally. And then the other side is they are so averse to the spotlight, they can't take a compliment, but they desire to be on stage. They want some visibility, they're craving it, but they're also so deathly afraid of it. And so I feel like it's finding the right stage, the unique stage for you to shine and share your gifts. So can you speak to your journey around this a little bit?
Yeah, so well said, Heather. So yeah, I mean, I think in my 20s, I was sort of the latter of what you just described. It was like I think it was also part of me unpacking the sort of ancestral privileges that I had. It's like, oh, I wanted to kind of be the martyr and pull back, and I wanted to be supporting other people to be out front. So I was like the ghostwriter. I was the speechwriter, but I never gave the speech kind of thing.
Mm,
And I think I had a lot of resentment about that. Um, deeper resentment in some ways about, oh my God, I'm working so hard to not shine and to help other people shine. It wasn't a good expression. And then in terms of now, one of the things that I do in addition to the kind of private, quiet work of psychotherapy and coaching one-on-one with people, which I really mean that is private work. The reason it's beautiful is that it's private. If it wasn't, it would not work. And so it's just so important, especially in a world where everything's so public and just in terms of social media and everything like that. But the one of the things I need to do to balance that for this Leo part of myself is I do trainings, and sometimes I will speak at a conference or I'll lead a workshop, as you know, and sometimes in the work we've done, a learning community where I'll be facilitating and speaking. And what I have actually found is really my sweet spot is usually in facilitating a large group. So sometimes didactic training will kind of hit that Leo spot of me being able to speak but it's more in the dialogue and the holding space for people that I find that I'm really enjoying it. But there is a Leo side to it. I'm being seen as someone who can
yes.
hold space in this kind of larger way. And it does feel like a power. Again, a healthy use of power, a healthy use of my power, an ability. And I'll just give an example. There was a training that I participated in at the end of the summer which was on maternal health in DC. DC has long struggled with Black maternal health outcomes, and it hasn't gotten better despite lots of efforts to innovate and have more trauma informed practices and maybe do more anti racist trainings and anti bias trainings. And we just can't kind of seem to move the needle. And it doesn't matter the class. Black women in DC have poor outcomes on maternal health. So this conference was mainly focused on that. And so as a white woman entering that space, you have to be really thoughtful about your use of self and how you're entering that space and why are you supposed to be there or not. And it was my role that they hired or asked me to do was to sort of facilitate um, a grounding, a kind of coming together, a holding of space that way. And then also at some point, a what are you taking away from this? So I had tiny little bits of time, and there was just something kind of about that I think was a really good example of me holding my power in the right way, holding the space of acknowledging the power in the room and allowing that to be the source of helping people ground themselves and just facilitating people to be themselves and unpack their own strengths and power. But, that does take a little Leo skill to get up in
Yeah,
front of the room and do that. Yeah. So I
it
think that's a
does.
good example of it.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the moon forever, but, um, I think that your moon placement shows you actually also what you are responsible for giving to yourself in order to feel at home and centered in your own energy. And I feel having all this information and making sure that you have those opportunities to shine because you shine so brightly in those spaces. You're so good at what you do. That's important to feel emotionally fulfilled. It's not 100% of the time that you're doing that, but it sounds like when you have opportunities to do it, you do it, and it's good for you to do it. And it's good for all the participants too. I mean, I can say that because I've been there. I've witnessed it. So, all right, I want to talk about some of your galactic alignments now. This was so fun. So, when I looked at your chart, I saw the soul of a royal healer and a frequency keeper. So you are somebody that bridges ancient wisdom with heart centered power. And there are some galactic themes that I can pull from a chart that I see from certain markers, but you don't fall neatly into any of them, and I think that's why your chart is so magnetic. You're not meant to fit into one category. You're here to weave your own category. So, we talked a lot about this Leo moon of yours. It's in the 12th house, which automatically tells me that you are very psychic and intuitive because the 12th house is the house of the unseen realms. So, it is also conjunct the fixed star Hydra Alphard. And this is, I would say, one of the most mystical and empathic combinations in the entire zodiac. So, Hydra Alphard connects you to this lineage of wise healers and herbalists and energy keepers who carried ancient medicine through lifetimes of exile and misunderstanding. So, the 12th house layer to this is deeply spiritual. It is the realm of intuition, of dreams, of soul memory. And so your emotional body is very attuned to the unseen. And when you allow yourself to feel fully, you actually tap into ancient knowledge that wants to be remembered through you. So that was very cool. Your Uranus, the planet of disruption and sudden change and revolution. This is where you're meant to stand out. This is where nobody can tell you what to do. You're going to do it in your own way. Your Uranus is in the sign of Scorpio, which is all about deep transformation. It's conjunct the fixed star Crux a Crux. And what this means is that this energy of revelation and transformation through truth is really how you stand out. Crux a Crux is one of the most sacred stars. It really speaks to the soul's descent into shadow in order to retrieve its light. And in your chart, it's expressed through communication and teaching, which is the third house. That's where your Uranus is. This is where you are doing your own thing. You are shaking things up. So this means your words, your ideas, and even the tone of your voice, which all of us have experienced in this conversation, have the power to catalyze awakening in other people. And so you're not here to speak comfortably, you're here to speak alchemy. And then the
Hmm.
other thing that stood out to me, I know this is a lot, um, your Venus, which is what you value, what brings you pleasure. It's also how you value yourself. Your Venus is in the sign of Libra, which is also ruled by Venus. So you have a very strong Venus, and Libra is cardinal air. It's very concerned with creating beauty and harmony and justice. It's a partnership and relationships. Your Venus is conjunct Bootes Arcturus, one of the brightest and most benevolent stars in our sky. And Arcturian souls are the bridge builders. They are advanced healers who blend science, art, and spirituality to elevate consciousness. And so with your Venus here, Love and beauty are your sacred technologies. You
Mm.
heal through harmony, through showing people what grace looks like when it's lived, not performed. This is the frequency of the cosmic artist, the peacemaker, and the one who restores balance to fractured spaces just by being yourself. And then finally, there was so much, but these were just the highlights. Um, you're part of fortune, which is a calculation. It isn't a celestial body. It's a calculation which shows us where you will receive, where you will experience the most fulfillment in your life. Your part of fortune is also in Virgo, more Virgo energy. It is conjunct the fixed royal star Leo Regulus, which is rare. And this shows to me that you have this destiny of noble service, leadership rooted in integrity and devotion. Regulus carries the codes of divine kingship and queenship, but when it's aligned with Virgo, it becomes about sacred service rather than ego. So
Mm.
your joy, your abundance, your fortune come from leading with heart and humility, which you're already doing, from turning your mastery into medicine for the collective. So when we just weave all of this together, what I see is that you are a being who walks with grace and power, who heals through beauty, truth, and presence. And you're a soul that has been around for eons and eons, carrying the wisdom of priestesses, healers, and star teachers. And you've mastered the art of remembering the light even in the dark. And so your voice, your love, and your leadership are all ways the cosmos moves through you. So I know that was a lot. How do you feel? How is this landing for you?
It sounds pretty magical, Heather. I mean,
You are
I
magical.
do. Oh, you're a love. I definitely can sense truth to it. I mean, the sort of sacred service, truth, being able to see the light in the darkness. These are all things that I definitely can relate to. I think as I hear it, there is perhaps the Virgo critic or maybe just observer in there being like, well, maybe you should be doing a little more with your life. And so, but I can hold that. That might be like a healthy tension to hold. I'm
Yeah.
definitely where I need to be right now, and we'll see where this journey takes me. I do often feel that there's a little more leadership in me than I have that I'm currently expressing, as you know, because you know me really well in my day-to-day professional life and maybe even in my personal life. And yet I know this is right now. I don't think that I'm playing small. I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing in this moment, and maybe it has something to do with where I am in motherhood and parenting and my own internal healing work, but probably at some point there might be a little bit more of a leadership role. But I know I'm a leader right now in the way that I do things. So I think the way you just said it just helps me feel aligned and lucky and grateful that I am where I am.
Amen. Amen to all of that. So as we wind down, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share any projects that you're working on that you're excited about. What are you up to right now?
So, as you know, I just got knee surgery. So one of my actual projects right now is truly just getting my physical body strong again. I just had a little knee surgery, which happens sometimes, but it's an important project. It feels important to me. So maybe part of that, just ensuring I don't burn out, ensuring that I do that self work. So that's one little project I have. In terms of maybe more of a professional kind of project, my little collective at Rooting Resilience, we have been hit as all DC based organizations, but really all organizations in the United States right now have been certainly heavily hit by the fact that we are under a real attack in our current political landscape for values of things like health equity, doing transformational work around trauma informed practices, or quite frankly, just being more efficient in the way we spend money and use our money on healing. in this country, particularly if we think about healthcare as one of the main sources that we currently heal. Well, guess what? We're not doing too great in that area. So, just ongoing project that I'm kind of constantly working on is thinking about how can we fund healing, whether that's relational healing in the workplace, whether that's trauma healing that's happening because of our systemic problems or just trauma happens in a population. So I'm always thinking about where can we kind of feed that healing in. And sometimes I've done it in healthcare settings where we're doing trauma informed practices and healing, but a lot of that funding's gone away. So now I'm looking at the private sector, trying to figure out who realizes that workforce burnout, for example, is a big problem, frankly, for their bottom line, because that's what we still live in this capitalist world. Who wants to fund the kind of healing practices and facilitation of healing and transformation, which is based in real science, so that we can have workers, ideally healing workers, people that do healing work, do their jobs for a long time and continue to be better teachers and better healthcare workers and better nurses and better doctors and even better tech workers, because that's so much of our labor in the future. How can we do it well so that we don't just keep exploiting and power over is sort of capitalism in a nutshell? How do we break that cycle in lots of different places? So anyone who's interested in helping me think about how to bring some of this healing into workplace spaces, let me know, because I'm all for it. And some of our traditional funding means just drying up right now.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do. If people are interested in getting in contact with you, they want to learn more about all of your different projects, where should they go to learn more?
I would direct them to the Rooting Resilience website, which is, again, not necessarily all comprehensive, but it's a good place to get a sense of some of the more public things that we do at Rooting Resilience. And it's just rootingresilience.com, and they can find me there.
Wonderful. And then are you on LinkedIn? Do you have a presence on there?
I am on I presence, not my forte, but I'm on there.
Okay. All right.
Under Ali Jost, which is spelled with a J. There's that Swiss ancestry for you.
Yes. Okay. So I'll put all of those links in the show notes. I have one last question for you that I ask all of my guests. So, what are the new cycles that you're starting in your
Mm.
lineages?
Goodness. Because of all that Virgo energy, one of the things that I'm really working on is my criticism and really my ableism. And it is something that has come up for me as a mother, but also as a therapist. And I have a lot of work to do there, um, on really being curious and accepting lots of different brains that I might come across, different bodies. And as you know, Heather, because we grew up together, there's a long old history of being pushed to be a certain kind of way in the world and a really high achieving person. And that's always going to be important to me. But really, the cycle I want to break is that one. I really want to make sure there's lots of abundance and celebration of other skills like creativity, quiet, spirituality. And that's hard living in Washington, D.C. and living the way I've been trained and frankly, the brain I have with all that Virgo energy. But that's something I'd like to really change. I'd like to not make people feel othered by just having a different brain, a different approach to the way they live, think, and work in the world.
Okay, beautiful. I love this. Well, this has been amazing. You are amazing. The hostess with the mostess. I love you so much. Thank you so much for being open to being on the show, being in dialogue with me. This is such a treat. Thank you.
I love you so much, Heather, my oldest, most loyal, most magical friend. I know I'll see you soon.
Yes. All right. Well, everyone, Thank you so much. We will see you next time on the Cycle Starters podcast. Bye, everybody. Bye, Allie.
Bye.